All right, so we are a little late to the party. I've been having some technical issues, but we are going to get right into today. A little bit of a difference here. One sec. We actually did have some folks who went ill. Not something I'm still trying to adjust and figure this sort of stuff out, but I try to make this as episodic as possible, and part of that process ends up meaning that we can, no matter what players show up, we can continue going. However, you know, obviously burning wheel beliefs do sort of tend to entangle all of the other PCs, which, really adds to a certain richness involved in this whole process. So, we're gonna, see how that goes. I think I'm actually online. I actually had done this a couple times before and it had not worked. So I'm excited that we have this going now. And everything seems to be going pretty well. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about Ashen Fields. You're looking at the Agishnik, and the Agishnik is the Gudishnik is the. This is basically going to be a log of what happened in the game. It's also going to, over time, allow players to add some of their own pieces, help us keep track of ARDA and things like that. And when we do trade votes and such, we're all going to capture that. We Let's see here. What else is going on? We do have a little calendar going on. So while this is not Torchbearer, we are going to be managing some pieces that I like from Torchbearer in terms of like some downtime action, some idea. We're not going to have the grind, which is probably a big piece of the equation that is a disconnect for some players. But we are going to have this idea of being able to go to different places and things like that. I'll have to turn on the loop for that. There you go. There's they're going to What's going to happen is that they're going to have time to ostensibly between sessions or between encounters. How much time they take, of course, is going to affect our monthly maintenance cycle, but also is going to move the rest of the world forward in various ways. So there is a calendar. This calendar is there is 12 months, 28 days. This is a lunar cycle. There are two sisters. The moons are two sisters. One comes out once a season. The other one comes out every night. It's Akgaz and Karagaz. A little bit of lore there. This is going to be sort of telling us what the tale of these individuals are, but that at the same time, whenever I can, capture certain tests and certain things that are going on. But we do want to remain pretty solidly in the fiction. So each journal entry is going to be marked with this is session and episode, as well as what at the beginning of the session, what the moon's phase is, in other words, what day of the month we're in, and then this is to next year's 200th year anniversary of the official beginning of the expansion of the Empire, which is probably about 2 weeks travel from this little county. This is what I sort of see it as. Thus, this is the year of our Emperor 199. That's what it is in Cyrillic. This is a temperate climate, so there are going to be 4 seasons. And I do have down here what the names of the seasons are, what they sort of represent, what some of the various holidays are that they have, including, we're not going to go too heavily into the religion of what's going on. It might be probably an episode. So while twice a month we'll have actual sessions, the other alternate weeks I will go into some of the setting, go into some of my development and things like that. We're actually in Grozdar right here towards the end of the year, so you can imagine that come Gurnik of 200 will, there'll be a lot more celebrations and things like that. So let's get a little into what's happened in the past two sessions. Session 1, after 2 hours hike from Fairmarsh Village, which is where 3 of the 4 PCs grew up. It's probably about 3 hours from hike from us. It's very interesting that they do not have horses yet. I'd be very curious if they decide to start traveling by horseback. The group arrives at Ember's Keep to find it neglected and in ruin. The first and second floor are largely intact, but the top floor is missing half of its roof. The structure is in a modest defensive keep, sort of nestled into the foothills. It used to be a noble house that was guarding a pass. The courtyard is ransacked and the courtyard wall is scattered. One of our characters, Muruk, begins a rite and finishes with black cloak ritual. Muruk is an orc. Yes, there is in fact an orc in the party. This orc travels from a far off land in some sort of quest that there is own leadership. Now, it is very interesting that this orc has attained a name. They are not named. I should make that very, very clear for fans of Burning Wheel. I'm guessing that maybe they gave themselves a name where we have not come upon that yet. If they meet other orcs, this may come up, so we'll see how that works. Black Cloak Ritual. The Black Cloak Ritual is really interesting because it's a combination of 2 human spells, which actually gives you give their opponents an ob to hit plus a little bit of armor. So it's really pretty awesome and is going to really come into play later on. So Murux does this right, and then Eska, our local hunter, gets down and starts looking for where the critter goes in and out of this keep. They will find an entry in the wall of the second floor where the creature climbed up stone wall, and they find these big gouges in the wall to sort of intimate that this creature has long claws that it climbs on. And about how big it is, they definitely get a sense that this is a pretty sizable beast, maybe the size of a horse. Ivan and Eska help Muruk up, and the orc enters a crumbling hole. So after a little bit of exploration, everyone else goes around to the front of the building and checks out the front door. They force it open, and they all eventually meet in the keep's mudroom. Eska looks about this new space for clues, but finds only death. She does a new tracking roll, and there in the massive spiral staircase lays the creature in wait to pounce. It is called an Atzia. An Azdaya rather, and the Azdaya, more of its history will be maybe revealed later on, but they begin their first fight, their first conflict. At first, Muruk leads the engagement and but fails the speed test, and the group is looking at a 1 obstacle penalty for this whole exchange. And remember, for those of you who don't know, Burning Wheel exchanges happen in 3 volleys. Let's see here. Mudok tanks the Adzia as Philippa attempts to smack it with her staff. Ivan backed off from the melee and let loose a spell. I really have to work on the tense in this. It needs a little bit of editing. I'll apologize in advance. The stone walls crack as shards of stone tear through the creature. First blood is drawn as he casts a shard spell. Ivan rushed off and swung his axe as Philippa backed off and began drawing symbols in the dusty flagstone to cast a spell of her own, Emperor's Hand, which is a spell that drains the strength of an opponent and gives it to the caster. Escas paced the periphery of the fight, bringing arrow to bowstring. So, again, bows take a very long time to draw and release, and so Eska's basically going to be spending this entire exchange drawing her weapon. The creature surges forward and makes Mudok head only. Hold on 1 second. Let me just move this around a little bit. There we go. I want to see the same thing you guys are because, let's see, Mudok continues the whole line. There we go. Keeping himself, let's see here. The creature surges forward and meets Mudok head on, only to be met with the orc's shield. Mudok stood his ground, and the great beast only managed to shift the orc a pace back, his boots sliding ever so slightly across stone and a half-decade of dirt. And it turns out the Mudok's build is, it's definitely, he's a beast. So now the huntress raises her bow and the Adzaya hisses at her. And now they switch up, and Eska is actually the one who's going to do the positioning test with a longer weapon. Succeeds at the positioning test, and now you're going to see probably a pretty similar formula that this group is going to take over time, which is have a bowyer and the periphery sort of taking these tests and holding the line, while the orc with a shield and a spear hold their adversary back, often a creature, and then the two sorcerers can sort of kite it and pelt. And this is going to be, this is an interesting part of this experiment, which is Burning Wheel definitely advantages numbers a great deal, right? It is particularly designed for one-on-one combat and multiple people fighting a creature. Unless the creature has multiple attacks in some fashion, they're going to find themselves at a really, really significant disadvantage. Certain things like a void do affect everything and every attack, so we are going to be looking at creatures that maybe have area of effect, that may have ways for controlling certain PCs, i.e., paralyzing them or whatever the case is. And it's going to be a big part of the equation is how do I keep the PCs from just basically, 4 strikes and a creature goes down. So, the Huntress raises her bow and the Utsua hisses at her. Ivan watched as his crew begins to coalesce not as individuals but as a unit. Mudok continues to hold the line, keeping himself between the beast and his compatriots. The Utsua bats in Mudok's shield and has one baleful eye on the Huntress, who is in the distance. Eska brings up the bow, studies the creature for a moment. The thing bristles in stone plates, everywhere but that eye. She lets a flower fly and the thing howls as Eska's arrow finds its mark. It backs up and shakes its enormous head, trying to lose the weapon sticking out of its head. Now, Philippa steps forward, her eyes glowing in eldritch might. She speaks the word of dead emperors past, calls upon their terrible might. She sees a glimpse of the future. The creature stops flailing and puts its one good eye in Philippa, and the enchantress is consumed by blue flame. So let me contextualize a little bit of what's going on here. So, this, I'll be first to admit that this was a bit of a misstep on my part. I did make the creature a little too tough. I gave it a 10 fort, which was not appropriate. I was considering 10 fort. I was considering like nastier creatures being gray and white shades, but really 10 is kind of beyond the ken. Although it is important to note that they still held their own and still managed to survive pretty well. It was really a stalemate from this really, really beefy creature. I did pull it back. I retconned it and said, let's say it was a 7. It honestly did not change the outcome in that change. A 7 is still beefy, but I think much more of a appropriate number for this supernatural creature. But Philippa is consumed by blue flame. Ivan is distracted by his sisters collapsing in a flash of white light, and his own spell goes unraveled. Too much for his weakened frame, he too falls to the stone floor as both sorcerers fail their fort tests and go unconscious. Now, and part of my which you'll hopefully hear in the next couple of weeks. We have a theme song, and one of the lines in the theme songs is their bodies torn by power's dark embrace, which is going to be something happens. And there, I did a little sketch of Philippa um, being consumed by her magic power. Muto carries the monster while Eska steps up for another volley of arrows, another eye destroyed by the archer's deadly bow. So at this point, the huntress has blinded the creature. Our hunters roar and poke at the thing in molten hatred. The beast staggers and runs for it, back up the spiral staircase into the darkness above. Mudok does an intimidation test. This was actually kind of funny because they were trying to intimidate the creature to run away, and the creature was trying to disengage. So ultimately, the Asdaya runs up the spiral staircase, bumping into things as it goes. Our heroes breathe a sigh of relief and drag their unconscious members out into the sun. A short while after getting outside, Philippa's eyes go wide and she sits up with a start. She looks around, and keep in mind, she's just taken a mortal wound, right? She's just basically been consumed by flame. She's still smoking a little bit, but now she sits up with a start and is looking around, eyes wide. This is because Philippa's character spent a persona. And so spending a persona, what that does is it negates the mortal wound. She still is very wounded. She still has a traumatic wound, but it negates the mortal wound. And she's hit with a consequence. And we're going to see what that consequence is in a bit. And Philippa says, why were we so ill prepared? She keeps asking. And Eska's like, you were there, same as us. They find a copse of trees about a half hour away in a small valley between some of the low mountains. Eska is cursing under her breath, trying to obfuscate their trail so the beast cannot follow, but Mudok frustrates her efforts at every step, inviting the Adzadaya to engage. They have a fitful night's sleep. It's not until about midday that the brother Ivan finally rouses from exhausted stupor. They discuss next steps with Philippa chiming in. Ivan, you are so unprepared, she says to her brother. Yes, we'll have to do more research next time. No, I mean your actions. You left us without the necessary power, without the knowledge needed to do any of this. Ivan blinked at his sister. Something was off. He saw it. Eska saw it. Mudok, well, the orc cared not what these things did. So at this point, they see something's wrong. They see that there's some there's some issue with Philippa, and they begin a duel of wits with Cedric. Now, backstory, Cedric is in fact Philippa and Ivan's old sorcery instructor, and of which Ivan, probably about 7 years ago, murders. Ivan murders the sorcerer's instructor and then takes off, like literally is homeless for a while until he runs off to join the Empire, you know, 8-year expansion campaign. And so they don't quite know this yet, but that is the consequence that the persona provides. So they go into a duel of wits. What's going on with you? What are you prattling on about? Ivan asks as I was narrowing his sister. Philippa answers, you killed your master, didn't you? Ivan's eyes went wide for a moment and narrowing again. What are you complaining about? You hated him as much as I did. What? Philippa never showed me an ounce of disdain, so here in the duel of wits, Cedric tilts his hand, and they discover that it is not, in fact, Philippa inhabiting the body. Eska and Ivan stood now, the fire between them and Ivan's sister. Eska yelled at Ivan, see, I told you she woke up too fast. She's been acting strange. Ivan shouts at Philippa, what did you do with her? Let her be. Mudok stands, draws a wicked blade, realizing what's going on, and says, perhaps he will leave once we make his new vessel uninhabitable, threatening Philippa's physical body. With intimidation, by the way. Philippa stood slowly, shaking her head. What was Philippa? She is okay. I saved her. She is resting, and in return, I am here. Not for revenge, but for penance. Ivan considers his old master inhabiting his sister's body. His compatriots stood behind him. He put up his hand and nodded. Well, you got what you deserved, but the least I could have done was bury your body. So here is the point where basically Cedric fesses up to possessing, and part of the compromise is that Ivan agrees to go put Cedric to rest, and that there ends our very first session. The second session is more of a catch-up. We were having some technical issues, but we wanted to, we ironed out some of the ARDA, and we just have a couple little scenes. Eska decides these people are too much of a liability, seeks greater fortune beyond the mountains. Unfortunately, the player playing Eska decided that she wouldn't be able to play, and much luck to her. Probably talk about some of that stuff later on, but you know, it's neither here or there. It is clear that Cedric's necromantic magic is keeping Philippa alive, and Cedric agrees to not leave Philippa until she is strong again. Some of Philippa's beliefs change, right? So some of Philippa's beliefs change. I've agreed to not possess Philippa forever, but I must ensure Philippa recovers before I depart. There's another one. I will not resort to finding a priest who might harm my spirit. I think that's part of that one. Let's see. I have unfinished business with my family. I will write to my children. I will not allow anyone else to read my letter, which must serve as my will. So that's interesting. So we got a little will action going on here. That's fun. So, Ivan and Cedric speak of Ilya, trying to get Philippa healing. This means traveling back to Fairmarsh. Mudok is hesitant to leave when they have the beast injured and cornered, but does not wish to go in alone. Mudok agrees to heal Philippa and see Cedric to rest, finding what adventure they can have in the haunted orchard of Nettlebarrow. They travel back to Fairmarsh, and a trepidatious Ilya, who's sort of a Fairmarsh's soothsayer and healer, takes Philippa in. Ilya fails her initial herbalism check, and Philippa consequently fails her initial health test. All this does is basically set or recovery time to be the maximum, which is 6 months. So, and then the tests were made to, allow Philippa to start the healing process. This is a big deal in Burning Wheel, right? You're seeing that this is going to be actually a 6-month recovery time, and also loses -1 to her agility and power. Imagine that in other games where basically you're going to lose agility and power. I remember back in the day for D&D, wish spells. No, it wasn't. Was it wish spells? Wish spells would incrementally increase your stats by like a small increment. It like wasn't the whole thing, but I'm trying to remember. There was draining at one point in time. They don't really do that much, but just like regular drains could like actually drop your agility or your dex or your physical stats down or whatever the case is. You have stat drains, which I think is pretty interesting. There's neither here nor there. I don't know why I brought that up. Anyway, tough consequences for the first outing. What we've decided is within that consequence, Cedric actually ultimately saves Philippa's life. Philippa's player Ian has decided to actually play Cedric. So technically the idea is that while Philippa is recovering, we're playing Cedric's ghost, right? By and large is what's happening there. So in this frail form, this very damaged form, Cedric does have a hard time controlling the body, so over time is actually going to degrade a little bit. He is going to get some wounds, be able to shrug them off, and manage to play. But while Cedric adventures, Philippa's 6-month clock stops. So it could extend the period of time that Cedric is in Philippa. Consequently, there are various magical methods that Cedric can go through to solidify that connection a little bit more, but Ivan is definitely going to work against that, not wanting Cedric to continue possessing his sister's body. So that's what's going on. That's our first 2 sessions. Pretty happy with how they're going. We are adjusting a lot of stuff, but this is what this is kind of all about. First off, we're learning technology. It's definitely a learning process for me, but then on top of that, settling into how Burning Wheel is ultimately going to work for us, and understanding how these mechanisms are going to tell good stories. So let's see here. One other thing that I wanted to mention is, by the way, hey, Vox and Quill, great that you joined us. And please, by the way, head over to Vox and Quill. They have a stream. They have a long-standing world and setting that spans multiple timelines, called Evandale. And thanks for your support, SJ. We really appreciate it. So just a couple announcements. Next week we may not have a stream. We might. I'm going to try to do this every single Sunday, so please tune in. But we won't have a stream on 1/18 because I will be at the Philadelphia Area Expo, Gaming Expo in Oaks, Pennsylvania. And please come down if you get an opportunity to. And I will be at the Monty Cook Games booth running games. So please, by all means, stop by and say hello. We would love to know that you caught the stream, that you listen to the podcast. I will be sporting Modern Mythology colors while I'm running games there. I'm going to be running, obviously, Cypher. both a sort of cowboy western themed game called The Blue Knight, as well as two games of Numenera. So you should be able to see me there Thursday and Friday. It's very possible I'll run the stream on Sunday, but if not, hopefully you'll understand why, and I'll figure something out, something to put up. Let's see what else is going on. We will be having a Friday night stream starting soon. I keep promising a Trinity Aeon game, and I'm very excited about that. It's another die pool system, the story path system, and I'm going to be running both very pretty traditionally, but even though Burning Wheel is my 100% favorite game, I will say there's certain parts of Story Path that have, I feel like I'm trying to think of how I might incorporate them into Burning Wheel. So I don't know, we'll see down the line what that looks like, but for the time being, we're running stock standard Burning Wheel for the most part. I've also been considering doing other games. I don't want to dilute the Modern Mythology brand. We are all about basically how system feeds narrative. But, I do play other games. We have, amidst those computer games that I play, which is really only two, I am really an old head, is Minecraft and Hearthstone. Hearthstone's basically the only phone game that I play consistently. I tell you, I go through this cycle where what I end up doing is I'll load games onto my phone and then I'll play them for a while, get bored, and just go back to Hearthstone. But Hearthstone, particularly Battlegrounds, I'm very fond of, and Minecraft, my son got me back into. I might talk about games while I do those two things. So maybe that might be some background stuff, and I'll have a little bit to say. And meanwhile, maybe you watch me play some Minecraft. So I'm going to talk to my co-hosts and make sure everybody's cool with that. But that's what's going on with that. Other than that, I will say I hope you have a fantastic week. If you are in the area at all, by all means, please check out Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo. It's got a lot of luminaries and gaming influencers that are going to be involved, which is, I think, pretty cool. So I'll definitely do a debriefing when I get back. And heck, you never know. Maybe that's what I talk about next Sunday, right? Is what happened at the Gaming Expo. I'll be running again all MCG stuff, but in the future I'll probably run other things. I want to lay of the land before I mark my own territory with that sort of stuff. And and if you do talk to me, I might have like some fun little swag. Nothing terribly exciting, but I might have some fun little swag for people who come up and mention the podcast, and we'll see how that works. So have a great week, and I will talk to you all very soon.